Thanks. There we go. All right, so today's Lunch and Learn, I'm really excited that Dr. Jennifer Henke has said yes to today. She did, I'm going to make sure I get this accurate, a graduate degree, PhD in entomology from UC Riverside. She was at Georgia as a graduate student, so she knows the South. She is one of those people who is behind the scenes doing things and changing things for the better for the majority, which is wonderful. She is the current Vice President-elect for the Entomological Society of America, which means she will become the Vice President for our society this fall. And that's a 4-year commitment to leadership. So she's a woman in science from the South and more in a leadership position. And she's also the district manager for the Coachella Vector Mosquito Control District, which I've mentioned to some of you in passing that the mosquito abatement programs in California are really there as a part of a bigger system. And I don't know if we're going to talk about it, so I won't talk about it too much. But with that, she's a great person and more, and I will be quiet and turn it over. Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. So before I get too far down the path, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. We're always, as my workplace, we're always excited talking to educators because you guys get to take, what we do and bring it into classrooms and then, hopefully build future scientists that want to come and join and work with me. So one thing that Dr. Troutfix, unfortunately has the misconception of is that I am not a PhD graduate. So I did spend a long time studying at UC Riverside, and then I dropped out of getting a PhD. So I have a master's degree in entomology from the University of Georgia, but no PhD for me. But, let that show you that you can be a dropout and still go on to do all sorts of fun things. So with that, I do have some slides. And as Becky said, if you're more comfortable turning your camera off, totally understand. I don't like to have people look at me while I'm eating my lunch either. So let me just show you this. So I am the laboratory manager out here at Coachella Valley. You should be able to see some slides from me. And what I was asked to talk to you about today is a little bit about what my district does and how do we use data and the work that we do on a routine basis. I'll talk a little bit about kind of how mosquito control districts are organized here in the area as well. My department, even though I'm called the laboratory manager, my department's called surveillance and quality control. So I'll talk a lot more about kind of the work that they do. And then Becky had asked that I share some information about me as well. And so I'll do that at the end of today's time. So my agency started in 1928, and we really started not for mosquitoes. We started because of INATs, which are these little tiny, small, non-biting flies. I mean, it looks huge here, but I promise they're little itty bitty things. And they're really attracted to plants as they're breaking down. And southeastern Riverside and Imperial County, which is to the south of us, we're an area where there's a lot of agriculture. Imperial is sometimes called the salad bowl of the US. We're producing a lot of lettuce and tomatoes and all sorts of food that way. And so, of course, as those break down, you get flies. And these little flies, they don't puncture as they're biting, but they do pick up the pathogens that cause a pink eye because they like to be in the mucus around your eyes and nose and mouth. And so this became a problem here in our valley because the flies were so numerous, and they were closing the schools for a month or two at a time just because of how much pink eye there was in the area. There's a joke that you knew at the time that people were from Coachella because we said hello a little differently. We waved our hands in front of the face to try and get those flies away from us. So we started really for that, and our county designated to have an entomologist on the program and then to really look at INATs and how to deal with those. In 1951, we added mosquitoes to the program. I said there was a lot of agriculture going on. It really picked up in the 50s because of the changes in water conveyance around here. And a lot of the water that was being used was also to try to get the salt off of the field. So they'll flood the field at first to get the salt off of it. And you would think mosquitoes wouldn't live in it, but mosquitoes totally will. And so we started adding that program at that time. In 1995, the district changed its name from being a mosquito abatement to being mosquito and vector control, because we started doing other things besides just mosquitoes and INATs. In 2005, we picked up red imported fire ants. There had been a state program because red imported fire ants had been part of different parts of California, and our residents in 2005 found that the state was no longer going to support that program, but they still wanted that as a service. And so I, having grown up in the southeastern US, I know that you all also know quite a bit about fire ants. These days, the district is here in southeastern Riverside County. So LA is approximately here out on the coast. San Diego is down here on the coast. So we're a little bit further inland from everybody, about 2.5 hours to 3 hours drive from both of those places. We have 67 full-time employees and 11 seasonal employees. It makes us one of the largest staffed districts here in California. We cover 2,400 square miles, but the focus is really in about 590 square miles. So looking at Tennessee, the area that we're supposed to cover includes the counties of Knox, Blount, Sevier, Cocke, and Jackson. I think I have those 5 right. But really the work that we're doing, take where I am and just imagine that I'm covering all of Sevier County. So that's kind of how we're set up. There's 9 cities. We go from Palm Springs down to the city of Indio, including the unincorporated county areas as well. And then we have a $13.5 million budget. That's all property tax and then property tax assessments that the residents have said that they want to pay in order for us to do the work that we're doing. We have a vision of having a future free of vector-borne disease using scientific, technical, and educational strategies that are financially and environmentally sound. So basically, we're trying to do all sorts of things that are right, right, in all the ways that we can try and be right in the world. That's what it really boils down to. And I see the comments in the chat of how we have a lot more paid employees compared to some of the areas that you have are in Tennessee. That is something that's come up historically, that California created a health and safety code and then started trying to ensure that they could be free of diseases. And they really had a UC system, the University of California system, where researchers were saying, if you pay people to do this, you won't have malaria and you won't have these diseases. And I don't know how well those guys were at doing salesmanship, but it worked, that they were able to sell people on paying the services for the work that we do these days. I mentioned a little bit before that we do more than just mosquitoes, and we do. The major work that we do is on mosquitoes and on red imported fire ants. We do provide more educational services on the 3 that are over here to the right. For bees, there are Africanized honeybees in the area. We're mostly providing information to people. And then if there's bees in a public property, like a park, we would do work at that point. But other than that, we're mostly in education. For rodents, because we don't have viruses or pathogens that are being transmitted regularly, we're mostly in an educational role. It's not true of some of my other neighbors. There's some typhus that goes on in Orange County and Los Angeles County. So they do more active work with rodent control than my agency does. And we don't do a whole lot with INATs anymore. We did a study about a decade ago and found that they weren't as big of a problem here as they once had been. But my colleagues in San Diego County still have INATs as a problem that they're having to deal with. So that does mean that 95% of the time, our agency is really working on mosquitoes and red imported fire ants. I'll spend more of our time now talking about mosquitoes because of the work that you all are doing. We only have 13 species that we capture on a routine basis in the Valley. 3 of those species are capable of transmitting virus, so they're the 3 that we care about the most. 2 Culex species, including our Culex quinquefasciatus. And we have Aedes aegypti mosquitoes as our third species. We have two other species that we do make treatments for because both Serophora and this Aedes vexans will bite people, and they cause a lot of discomfort to our agricultural workers and people that are working outside. So we do a lot of work to, again, control those mosquitoes. But that means the other 8, we're not doing a lot of work around because they're not impacting people. And you all have been working on La Crosse virus, West Nile virus, and St. Louis encephalitis virus are the 2 big viruses that we have in the area. They're both bird human cycles. And so that's something that we're also monitoring as our work. We do our work based on integrated vector management principles, similar to integrated pest management principles. That means that we want to do lots of public education, surveillance to see what kinds of mosquitoes we have and what kinds of viruses that they're transmitting at a time. And then we do work with cities and governments to talk about preventative practices. How do we ensure that they're not harboring rats or mosquitoes in places? And then when it comes to finding mosquitoes or finding a need to make those control decisions, we'll use biological control in places that we can. Physical control, if you're working in a desert, you can just try to get rid of standing water. That makes it a lot easier to not have mosquitoes. And then making chemical control and pesticide applications in appropriate places. So my team is the Surveillance and Quality Control Department. They do monitoring of mosquito and virus with weekly collections of mosquitoes and weekly testing on site for arboviruses. We do a lot of focused response. So if we find virus in an area, we're going to go back and trap that area again and see if we can help our colleagues figure out, hey, we got it both at our routine trap location and then kind of to the north. So that's where you should focus your efforts. We review what kinds of pesticides are working, how well they're working, how long people can expect them to work. And we do a lot of review of environmental regulations. So in light of the GIS work that you all are doing, I thought I'd show you a few things that are what we've got. This is what the valley looks like to me. These colored dots are all different trap locations in our cities that are up here to the north and west side. We have 2 kinds of traps that we're setting. These gravid traps have smelly water in the bottom of them, therefore mosquitoes that are looking to lay their eggs. They get sucked up into the collection vial here through the fan that's coming out here. And then this trap is a BG Sentinel trap. It has a scent lure that smells like feet for, excuse me, for Aedes mosquitoes. And we're using carbon dioxide in the form of dry ice melting here to be the other attractant for host-seeking mosquitoes, mosquitoes that are looking to bite people. And those are the blue and purple dots that are throughout here. And then in the Eastern Valley, we have our carbon dioxide traps or CO2 traps. These are built off of a model of the CDC style. We don't use the rain guard because it doesn't rain here very often. But again, we're using carbon dioxide. And those are better for the Culex tarsalis mosquitoes that live out here in the Eastern Valley. My team brings all of those traps back on a routine basis. They sort out, they can tell you all the mosquitoes that are in there, male to female, and then they'll pool them. They'll take 50 females of the same species and put them all in a test tube, and then do virus testing on site for West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis virus, and Western equine encephalomyelitis virus, which are the 3 that we've had here in routine. We have a program statewide that is called CalServe. It's now been expanded to a national model called VectorServe. And so we upload all of our data, and then we can see what all of our colleagues have going on as well. So in this case, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, this is early part of last year, where these different dots will mean that people were finding different viruses in their area. There are parts of Tennessee that are starting to use VectorServe. This is the public-facing side that you can see yourself. So if you go to maps.vectorserve.org, you can go find your part of the country. And not everywhere is using it, but I can see that at least 2 areas of Tennessee are starting to report their results. I happen to have clicked on Shelby, and what you can see is that recently, I've pulled this down to just this year for you, they've had a little bit of activity with flavivirus positive mosquito samples, and one that they confirmed was West Nile virus. So yeah, it could be that they've signed on to work on this particular project. It's taken California probably 20 years, more than 20 years. I know they started this in the late 90s, so 25 years to really get to this point. And I'm really excited that it has expanded out this far. But what I hope for you at some point is that your programs also expand in such ways. In this case, I have the surveillance turned on, so you can see the trapping effort as these heat maps. You can see kind of Los Angeles County is doing lots of trapping, but so far they haven't found a lot of virus activity just yet, and that'll change over the course of the year. And then you can see my agency here. We do a lot of trapping. We've had 3 positive samples so far this year. Internally, my team doesn't like heat maps in the same way, but they like colored graphs. So we also produce the information for them in this way, where they're able to see, hey, these traps had more mosquitoes compared with these traps that are whiter. And that lets the vector control technicians know kind of where they want to go focus their time. My board that I report to does like heat maps. And so this is our virus activity for last year. And you can see that most of that West Nile virus was down here in the eastern Coachella Valley around the Salton Sea, which is where we have a lot of migratory birds come into the area. So not something that was a surprise, but definitely something that was easy to show to them using all of the data that we've been able to put in. And then internally, we like to see what we're doing compared to averages. We're setting traps in the same place every year and have been for 40 years. So I use a rotating 5-year average and then compare it to last year. So you can see that currently this year, my collections are up higher than I would like for them to be. They're definitely above average, and they're above last year's collections as well. And then last fall, we had a huge increase in our population from the 5-year average, and I'm hoping that we don't have that happen again this year. So definitely different audiences like different things, and trying to figure out what works for them is really important for this. We also use this data for a risk model. This kind of is the other part that helps our team know where they should be spending their time. California together uses the same system. And so we're looking at, where are you finding virus in your mosquito samples? How many mosquito samples how many mosquitoes do you have, particularly compared to that 5-year average? Are you over your average? Are you under your average? What's the temperature for the past 2 weeks? How many positive birds have been found dead? How many people have that virus? And each of these is ranked from 1 to 5. And then you'll average your 5 values together, and that'll tell you if you're in normal season, if you should be planning for emergency work, or if you're at the epidemic point of your transmission cycles. And our vector service is starting to put this into their own program. Currently, I have to run this usually on my own. But here you can see that for this particular week last year, most of my valley was in normal season kind of routine work. And I was starting to see some areas where we should do some enhanced work. So mostly our work kind of really focuses on these 2 factors that we can focus on ourselves. I can't change the temperature, I can't change the birds, and I can't change the people, but I can change mosquitoes. So usually our operations and our outreach teams both focus on what's going on with these 2 variables. Our normal season work, I told you a little bit about what my team does. They go and collect mosquitoes and bring them back. We're in a desert, we get 5 inches of rain a year. And so that means that it's pretty easy to go figure out where's standing water. That's usually where the operations technicians are looking for. Where can they find standing water, both in people's backyards with a swimming pool that's not working properly, or irrigation runoff, or irrigation runoff is a big one for us around here. And then they're going to do their own surveillance. They take plastic dippers to see what kinds of larvae are there in that. Do they have larvae? And make appropriate chemical decisions based on that. And then our outreach team does lots of routine education. Hey, we have mosquitoes. It would help if you would get rid of standing water in your backyard that you don't need, like this swimming hole. We use a variety of different control applications. They're all mostly targeted for mosquitoes. Not everything is, it's really hard, but we do lots of trying to target and pick things that are safer. So in this case, you can see they're in our rural areas doing agricultural treatments. But we do also make helicopter treatments in some cases. It's really shallow, muddy work, and it can be really hard for the technicians to walk in. They also do lots of data collection themselves, which is important to us. This was initially built on an Esri system, and then it's been brought in internally, and they will collect. This is, zooming into a particular site. The technician can look at the history of that site. What did people do previously? They record, what did they find? They can record their glass treatment, what kind of chemical they use, so that they can rotate and make different applications. If they want to know whether or not what kinds of mosquitoes are in it, they'll bring us a sample, and they can see what those results are as well. And so there's a huge amount of data that they're putting in the field that lets us do all these kinds of work. So if that virus level starts to go up, we do everything that we were doing, and then we add to it because more is more. And so my team is those that are going out and doing extra trapping, kind of trying to figure out, like, hey, is that virus moving in places? And they've already done the pesticide efficacy work, but there's sometimes them reevaluating things and saying, hey, we shouldn't use this adult chemical right now. The mosquitoes are resistant to it. You should prioritize using these chemicals instead. The operations team will take all that data that they were entering, and they'll start running what we call buffers. And so they'll have the information from our trap there in the middle. For a QX mosquito, they'd say what happened in a mile outside of that trap, because the mosquitoes will travel roughly between a mile and a half. And they'll go prioritize going to those sites in that mile radius first. They get color coded back saying, you visited the site in the last 2 weeks, you haven't visited the site in the last 2 weeks, or you've got a longer chemical, something that should be working. And so they'll then be able to prioritize their work about what hasn't been visited first, most recently, and then, go check the chemical treatments next to make sure that they're working. So it helps them to kind of prioritize their work and quickly work through that zone. If they can find appropriate areas where there are plants that aren't flowering, they'll make barrier applications. And so that's what this is. They're applying a pesticide to the non-flowering plants where mosquitoes may rest, so that hopefully they're not continuing to travel on from there. They're posting disease warning signs in those areas too, letting people know, hey, we found virus in the area, go put on your repellent. And then we're doing more focused outreach events in those areas as well. We'll have community fairs, or we'll start going door to door and trying to talk to people and make sure that they understand what's going on in their neighborhood. If the virus is continuing to persist or continuing to persist in that area, we'll start looking at doing either truck mounted or adult or aerial applications of adult mosquito control. Those are usually mapped out over particular areas depending on where we are. We'll put out signs saying what we're doing and let people know what those are. And our public outreach team will also be hard at work doing press releases and media interviews and talking to people about what's going on in the area. And then, unfortunately, if it does continue to persist, and 2019 was a year where we had a lot of virus activity, then there's a lot of behind the scenes work that I do and my boss does. We're talking with county and state and other partners and saying, hey, we need help. Can you come over and help us out just to keep things going? We're talking with our vendors to make sure we have enough pesticide and dry ice and all of the things that we need. And we're also talking to our medical community and reminding them of what the symptoms are and what to watch for, so that they can submit people and their blood samples and get those tested appropriately so that we know what's going on. Okay, so that's the kind of the routine work of what we do on a normal basis. A little bit more about my team and what we're doing. My full district is 67 people. My team is 11, so kind of 15% of the district. I'm super thrilled that I have a large science department. I have a district that really believes in science, and so they've given me lots of folks to work with, which means I get to do lots of things and work with them on things. On top of all the trapping and the testing that they do, they look at control products on a routine basis. They're doing what I call like just basic science projects all the time. So if a new product comes in, they want to know, how long does it last? How much do we need to kill a mosquito? And if I use it if the label says that I can use up to 20 pounds, can I use 7 pounds and get what I really want out of it? Can I use 7 pounds and it will last as long as it's supposed to? And they'll take all that information and then help the technicians make better control applications. That saves us money, right? We're not wasting product that we don't necessarily need. It's better for the environment, and it can lengthen the amount of time that we have some of these pesticides that we can use. So yeah, I think that they get to do like all the best fun stuff. They'll also look at the methods that we use. And so in some cases it means, hey, I know this product will work, but what if I change how I'm applying it? What if I do it by a backpack instead of by truck? Do I get the same kinds of results? So they get to play with all sorts of fun things. And that means they're going out in the field with the operations team and they're seeing super muddy, terrible sites like this sometimes, and also people's backyards, because that's where mosquitoes are living too. And then sometimes people think that the team is just in the lab, but this is the short part of the work compared to all of the work that they did out in the field on a routine basis. Oh, yeah, that was Kim riding around with one of our staff. They also do adult mosquito control projects. So these are our flat cages, and they've put in about 25 females into each of the cages, and then we'll compare how they're working. We raise mosquito fish so that people can use them at pools that are green and that we can't drain. And we also get to work with researchers. So this is Bill Walton from UC Riverside when he was doing a series of applications for us. And you can see we're here partnering with some other folks that have been helping us do all sorts of studies to figure out how things are working and whether we can do them better. I mentioned briefly that we do lots of environmental regulations. California has a lot on top of what the EPA and others require of us. This is probably a big portion of my job, is ensuring that we understand what we should be doing and then interpreting that for everybody else so that they can comply with what we need to get done. California regulates pesticides on top of what EPA does. And so there's sometimes some additional work that we have to do for pesticide use and safety that California wants, sometimes in duplication, and sometimes there's a little extra box to tick. The Clean Water Act, pesticides that are applied for mosquitoes, you would think wouldn't necessarily need to be considered pollutants, but they are. And so we do comply with Clean Water Act as well. I say that like you would think that you've designed it to go into water, and so therefore it wouldn't necessarily be a pollutant, but some folks think it is. So we have some work to do with that. And then we have a California Environmental Quality Act. We're not supposed to harm the environment with the work that we're doing. And if we think that we might be doing something that could harm the environment, we're supposed to do things to try and make it less. And so there's a lot of work that goes on that side too. I like to share with folks a little bit about different career paths in mosquito control. And so this is all open and things that you can find on my district's website if you know where to look. This is the pay schedule down at the bottom. Happy to send that to you all to take a look. I do start out with seasonal employees that may join us for 6 months of the year. We'll pay them up. They start off at $17 an hour right now, can be up to $18 an hour. These top degrees, these top positions only need high school degrees or high school equivalency. So our entry-level positions are at about $50,000 a year. And these are folks that are doing lots of, for my lab technician, they're running traps and coming and bringing them back, whereas our lab assistant 1 and 2 start doing identifications of mosquitoes and building things and helping us out with the pesticide efficacy work. Same on our operations side. These are folks that are making those routine chemical entries and making applications on a routine basis. The vector control 2s and the lead technicians are doing more training and teaching people, but also making routine entries as well. So they have a lot of added responsibilities they go on. The biologist at my district does need a college degree, 4-year degree in biology, zoology. I have one in entomology right now as well. You can see that they make a nice salary. My 2 positions that are listed here, these are supervisory level positions, so they're salaried at the district. And so the field supervisors over in operations, the vector ecologists, I require that they have a master's degree or experience equivalent to that. and they do a lot of data analysis and planning of things. This is my position. It started out at 101. My current salary is 129. This is my boss. He's currently making 166. Besides that, it's 12 and a half days of vacation, sick leave. Manager level positions also include health insurance for our family, whereas everybody else gets health insurance for themselves. It's a good job. I like it. There's lots of good things that benefit you from that. My career path, if you just looked at my CV, which I did not provide, so you couldn't necessarily do that. I was an intern for a biotech company in Huntsville, Alabama in summer of 99 and 2000. I was an undergraduate research assistant at the University of Alabama, where I got my bachelor's degree, and then a graduate student researcher and teaching assistant at Georgia, where I got the master's degree. I spent a long time at UC Riverside, even though I didn't get the degree there. And then I started here in a position called environmental biologist before I was promoted to lab manager. And I put this up because I think this is really one version of looking at a person's life. But really, there's lots of little things that are underneath that we don't actually talk about. So I didn't go back to research genetics because they got bought out by another company. And so then there weren't internships offered anymore. And I had to find something to do for a summer. And I was really fortunate that I could take out student loans and go study Latin for a summer, which benefited me in understanding a lot of entomology terms and words that I needed to know. But I couldn't have done that if I hadn't been fortunate enough to be able to take student loans for it. I was a referee to pay for my all of the bills that I had to pay as a undergrad in Alabama. And I got promoted to be a supervisor and an intern there. I didn't know that you could go to graduate school and get a paid assistantship as a scientist. So I thought I was having to cobble together a research assistantship from recreational sports, where I knew you could, to be able to pay for my science degree. And that was actually the agreement that I had when I was going into the University of Georgia, was that I had applied to be their assistant over in rec sports and then go get an entomology degree, because the two of them were going to let me work together. And then at the last minute, they offered the position to another person. And I'm really fortunate that my advisor still wanted me and fought and made sure that there was funding for me. It didn't mean that at Georgia, I taught or I gave service to the department every single semester I was there. So that's why it took me a little longer to finish my master's than maybe it took some of my colleagues. I also still was a part-time referee because I had bills that I needed to pay that weren't getting paid by my assistantship. I worked security on the weekends for UGA football games because, again, like, I needed the extra pocket money. I had a year that was on fellowship there at Alabama, or at Riverside, sorry. And as I said, I ended up not finishing the degree that I was there for. So there are some things that, as you look at a person's CV, like, there's plenty that's not on the list as part of that. And so I'm going to spend these last few slides talking a little bit about things that I'm paid to do that aren't really part of my job description. And one of those is community relations. We do these days have a public outreach department, but when I started at the district, my district had a bad reputation in the community. There had been a huge scandal that had ousted one of the former general managers, and so my general manager, my boss's boss at the time, was really working to rebuild that and really wanting to make a change. This picture of these folks is the last picture I have of our board of trustees. They haven't all been together in the room, obviously, with COVID. But they had tasked my boss's boss with rebuilding our reputation. And they said she needed to fix that. And so that meant that they agreed that we needed to be a leader on mosquito and vector control issues at the local level, at the state level, and the national level. And when she was tasking that with us, she said that we had room to do the things that we thought would benefit our reputation. And so that meant, often talking with her about what those might be, but about a day a week, I'm supposed to be doing something that's in that realm. Some of what we've done is we have high school interns that come in and work with us on a routine basis over the different parts of the year. So we usually get 2 to 4 from 3 or 4 schools every year, and they'll spend they spend about 4 hours a week, 10 weeks of the year with different departments, and they'll come and hang out with my department for maybe a third of that time, where they get to learn more about mosquitoes and do little science projects and do those kinds of things. We also give out awards for science projects for that. But one of the things that I've spent a lot of time with is regulatory affairs and then service at different organizations. So Mosquito and Vector Control Association of California is my state level mosquito folks, where we talk to each other. And because my job was environmental regulations, I started asking the Regulatory Affairs Committee lots of questions. And eventually they decided they didn't want to answer all of my questions in front of people. They wanted me to be part of the committee. So I would ask them questions and try to get the work done with them. I've been with that committee since shortly after my first year here. And I ended up being chair for 4 years. And I've since have stepped back from being chair for that. I joined the AMC Science and Technology Committee. I forgot to look and see what date I actually joined them. But I took over, and I like helping people. And so I was a poster judge for a number of years. And then when that person wanted to step down, I said that I would be willing to take that on and assist with that. And I'm currently the chair of the Science and Technology Committee. And then for the Entomological Society of America, I'd stepped back my service for a period of time. And one of the people in my network knew they were looking for somebody to step in for the branch presidency, which is that we're broken up into regions. My region out here in the West is called the Pacific Branch. And so I was the president in 2019. And then I had people encouraging me to assist and continue to do things. And that's how I got elected to the position that Becky told you about before. And with that, I would highlight that different organizations are still different. I mean that in the nicest and the best ways. I think the Entomological Society of America is one that has worked hard and still has room to grow in diversity and inclusivity. There are still far too many issues of sexism and racism that occur in the Entomological Society of America. But I will say my own experience is that I've had far fewer instances of that happening than I have in the other two associations that I'm part of. I have unfortunately still seen and had reports of sexism and racism in both of those. And it is difficult to hear that, because I want to be able to be not having to think about that in my work. I want it to be better than what it is. And I am sure that you all, unfortunately, also have those kinds of issues that happen in your associations and in your workplaces. We have worked really actively hard on a lot of those, but unfortunately, there's still quite a bit of that still goes on. And I would highlight that again with my own board, that they know that this, like I said, these are 10 of the 11 members that represent all of my cities. You might notice that they all look pretty male, because they are. Our current board is 3 women out of the 11 members, which is the most that it has ever been. So a little bit room to grow, and definitely some room to grow with our racial diversity as well. We should have a lot more Hispanic and Latino members based on the makeup of our region here in the Coachella Valley. So that's some of my least favorite parts. I unfortunately do have folks that experience that and talk to me about it, and then we try to make things better. It's the trying to make it better is my favorite part, but having people experience that is some of my least favorite parts. We do work for the public, and that is a very varied group. It is some of the best parts, getting people excited about what we're doing and getting them to understand that we're not killing everything and we're really focused on the things that are causing them health problems is some of the best parts of it. It can sometimes be the hard parts, but it is still some of the best parts of it. And with that, I will briefly leave up this slide so that you can get my email address, but I'm sure Becky would be happy to give that to you as well. And I did want to at least give you all some time to talk to me about anything that I may have brought up or anything that I didn't bring up that you might want to ask me about.